Assalamu alaikum everyone, this is me Hania, e-commerce study student at Rehan School on an academy budget. So today I'm going to take interview with Maya. So Hannah, how are you?
Walaikum assalam. I'm doing great. Let's dive into Earth.
Okay, so my first question is, what is Earth and what make it different from other planets?
Earth is the third planet from the sun, but what actually makes it stand out is that it's the only place we know of that has liquid water on the surface. Because of that water in our atmosphere, which is just the right mix of nitrogen and oxygen, we've got a Goldilocks situation where it's not too hot or too cold for life to thrive. Most other planets in our solar system are either frozen wastes or boiling ovens with atmospheres that would be pretty hostile to, well, us.
Okay, how did Earth form?
I'm not sure I follow. What do you mean by perform? Are you asking about how I work or
Not perform,
something else?
form.
Was
Okay, my next question is, why is Earth called the blue planet?
because of all that water. Since water covers over 70% of the surface, it reflects blue light from the sun, which makes the whole planet look like a big blue marble when you see it from space.
Okay,
What's next?
what are the main layers of Earth?
Wait, hold on. I think the transcription's glitching again. I'm guessing you meant the layers of Earth? If so,
Yes.
we've got the crust we're standing on, the thick mantle underneath, the liquid outer core, and then the solid inner core at the very center. It's like a giant planetary onion.
Okay, why is Earth suitable for supporting life?
Earth is basically the ultimate sanctuary for life. It's all about that Goldilocks position, not being too close or too far from the sun. This keeps water liquid, which is non negotiable for life. Then you've got the atmosphere that gives us oxygen and protects us from harmful solar radiation, plus a magnetic field that acts like a giant shield, keeping the solar wind from stripping everything away. It's a very specific set of circumstances that just happen to be exactly what we need.
Okay, what role does water play in making Earth habitable?
Water is pretty much the secret sauce of life. It's not just about having something to drink, it acts as a universal solvent, which means it carries all the essential nutrients and chemicals into cells and flushes waste out. It also helps regulate the planet's temperature, moving heat around through currents so the tropics don't just boil and the poles don't just freeze. Basically, water is the transport system that allows biological and chemical reactions to even happen.
Okay, how did life begin on Earth?
I'm seeing another transcription glitch. I'm guessing you meant on Earth. Scientists think it all started with abiogenesis, where simple organic molecules like amino acids slowly organized into more complex structures in the early ocean. Some believe this happened around deep sea hydrothermal vents, where the heat and chemicals provided the energy needed to spark the first sparks of life.
Okay, how are humans, animals, and plants connected to each other?
We're all just parts of one big, messy, brilliant loop. It starts with plants, which are the heavy lifters. They take sunlight and carbon dioxide to make energy and release oxygen. Humans and animals then breathe in that oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide, fueling the plants. Beyond just breathing, it's a massive food web where energy moves from the grass to the gazelle to the lion, with decomposers like fungi cleaning up at the end to put nutrients back into the soil. It's a perfectly balanced circle where no one can actually exist in a vacuum.
Okay, why are forests important for the Earth?
Think of them as the lungs of the planet. Forests are critical because they soak up massive amounts of carbon dioxide, which helps keep the planet from overheating. They're also home to the vast majority of land based wildlife, acting as giant sanctuaries for biodiversity. Plus, they're like nature's sponge, regulating the water cycle and keeping soil from just washing away when it rains. Without them, the whole system would basically collapse.
Okay.
Okay.
Why are
What else is on the
forests
list?
important for Earth?
They're spread out across the whole planet, though they tend to cluster in specific belts. You've got the tropical rainforests hugging the equator in places like the Amazon and Congo, then temperate forests in regions like North America and Europe. And way up north, you have the boreal forests or taiga, which stretch across Canada and Russia in a massive green ring around the Arctic. It's pretty wild how the kind of trees there completely depends on the local climate.
Okay, what would happen if Earth lost a large part of its forests?
It would be a disaster. First, the climate would spiral. Without trees to soak up carbon dioxide, the planet would heat up much faster. Then you'd see a massive wave of extinction because so many animals only survive in those specific forest habitats. We'd also lose a huge part of our water regulation without the root systems holding the earth together. We'd see way more landslides and devastating floods every time it rained. It's a domino effect that would eventually make it much harder for humans to grow food and survive.
Okay, what is the most surprising thing about Earth?
Probably the fact that these forests are essentially our global air conditioner. When we talk about saving the planet, we usually think of building new tech, but the most sophisticated climate control system on Earth is already standing right there, just waiting for us to not chop it down. It's a wild realization that our survival basically depends on the root systems of things that can't even speak.
Okay, why do earthquakes and volcanoes happen?
Another glitch. I think the transcription just tripped over itself again. What was that?
I'm asking, why do earthquakes and volcanoes happen?
It's all down to plate tectonics. Not think of the Earth's crust as a giant jigsaw puzzle, but the pieces are always slowly sliding around on a hot, gooey layer of mantle. When those plates grind against each other, get stuck, and then suddenly snap loose, you get an earthquake. Volcanoes happen when there's a weak spot or a gap between those plates, letting molten rock from the mantle punch through to the surface.
Okay, how do oceans
Ready when you are?
contribute? How do oceans
They
contribute to
bas-
life on Earth?
they basically act as the planet's thermal regulator. Water moves heat from the equator to the poles, which prevents extreme temperatures. Plus, they're the absolute powerhouse for oxygen. Phytoplankton in the ocean actually produce about half of the oxygen we breathe, meaning every other breath we take is essentially a gift from the sea. On top of that, they provide a massive habitat and food source for millions of species that couldn't survive on land.
Okay, why is biodiversity important?
Think of biodiversity as the world's ultimate backup plan. It's basically a giant safety net for the planet. When you have a wide variety of plants, animals, and microbes, the whole ecosystem becomes way more resilient. If a disease wipes out one type of bee, but you have 10 other pollinating species, flowers still get pollinated, the fruits still grow, and the food chain doesn't collapse. The more diverse a system is, the better it handles shocks, whether that's a sudden drought or a new pest.
Okay, what is climate change and why is it happening?
hmm Basically, it's the planet's temperature rising faster than it ever has naturally. It's happening because we're pumping huge amounts of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. These gases act like a thick blanket, trapping heat that would normally escape back into space. While the Earth's climate has shifted before, this time it's happening at a speed that makes it really hard for nature and people to keep up.
Okay, how does global warming affect Earth?
Actually, it's the other way around. Global warming doesn't really cause carbon dioxide, but carbon dioxide is one of the main causes of global warming. It's like the greenhouse effect, where CO2 acts as a blanket that traps heat. There's a bit of a scary feedback loop where warming oceans release more CO2, But for the most part, the gas is the driver, not the result. That makes sense?
Okay, what are some of the biggest environmental problems Earth faces today?
We're talking about a pretty grim list. Pollution is a huge one, from plastics choking the oceans to chemicals in our air. Then you have deforestation, where we're basically destroying our own air filters, and the overall climate crisis that ties it all together. And it's a messy cycle where each problem feeds into the next.
Okay, how does pollution affect our planet?
It's a total system failure. When we talk about pollution, it's really about introducing things into the environment that nature can't process. Plastics in the ocean don't just sit there. They break down into microplastics that get into the food chain, poisoning the fish and eventually us. Chemical runoff from farms creates dead zones in the sea where nothing can live because the oxygen's gone. In the air, smog and particulates don't just make it hard to breathe, they can literally change the chemistry of the rain, which damages forests and acidifies the soil. It's essentially like throwing a wrench into a perfectly tuned machine, causing breakdowns across every single ecosystem.
Okay, what can individuals do to protect the Earth?
It starts with a few small, mindful shifts in how we live. One of the biggest things is just reducing what we send to landfills, especially by cutting back on single use plastics. It sounds minor, but imagine the difference when millions of people make that switch. Another huge move is just eating more plant based meals. You don't have to go full vegan, but even cutting out meat for a couple of days a week takes a massive amount of pressure off the land and water systems. And then there's the power of curiosity. Just talking about this stuff, asking the right questions, and encouraging others to pay attention to where their things come from is what actually starts to move the needle. It's all about making those sustainable habits feel like second nature.
Okay, how can technology help solve environmental problems?
It's pretty exciting when you look at the toolkit we're building. For starters, we're seeing things like carbon capture technology, which literally vacuums CO2 right out of the air to stop it from trapping heat. Then there's the energy shift with next gen solar and wind that can power whole cities without any emissions. We're also getting really smart with precision agriculture using AI to map exactly where crops need water or nutrients, which slashes waste and prevents chemicals from leaking into the soil. It's not a magic wand, but it's giving us a fighting chance.
Okay, if Earth could speak, what do you think it would say to humans?
I think it'd give us a serious reality check. It would probably tell us that we're wonderful guests who've completely forgotten how to take out the trash. I imagine it would be a mix of I love you and please, for the love of everything, stop acting like you own the place. Basically, it would set us straight on the fact that we're guests here, not the landlords.
Okay, how do mountains, rivers, and oceans shape life and civilization?
They basically dictate where and how we live. Mountains have always been the great dividers, often shaping unique cultures by isolating people and protecting them from invaders. Then you have rivers, which are essentially the original highways of civilization. Almost every major ancient society, like Egypt with the Nile, started next to water because it was the only way to grow food and move goods. And oceans, they've acted as both a wall and a bridge, connecting distant continents through trade while creating massive barriers that define the limits of different empires. Geography isn't just a backdrop, it's a blueprint for how human societies were actually built.